to the University of Cambridge in New England by Phillis Wheatley. Students to you 'tis giveth to scan the heights, above to traverse the ethereal space and mark the systems of revolving worlds. This is an inspirational quote from a very popular poem by Phillis Wheatley. This poem is about her struggle with education, or the definition of a proper education in America, one an enslaved girl can never truly achieve. Its deeper meaning is that she will never know what this advanced education is like, but how others could grow off the back of it when she could not. I will be explaining Phillis Wheatley's life as the first African-American female to publish a book of poems, and the importance of her story. Phillis Wheatley was born around 1753 in Gambia, Africa, where she would live until 1761, where she'd be captured by slave traders and brought to Boston, Massachusetts. She would be bought by Susanna and John Wheatley, and they made the choice to educate her even though she was their slave. And upon 16 months of her arrival, she could read the Bible, Latin and Greek classics, and British literature. She started writing poetry around the age of 14, and by 1767, she published her first poem. And in 1770, she wrote the poem, An Eclectic Poem on the Death of the Celebrated Divine George Whitefield, which brought her infamy in many ways. In 1773, Phillis traveled with the Wheatley's son Nathaniel to London, where she would meet the Countess of Huntingdon, who would eventually fund the publication of her book, Poems on Various Subjects, Religious and Moral. Phillis would then soon leave London for Boston to visit an ill Susanna Wheatley. She was then freed shortly after due to complications with Susanna. Phillis struggled to find funding even at the height of her career due to much of the Wheatley family passing in 1774 through 1778. But during that year, she would marry a freed black man named John Peters. They would have 3 children together, none which would survive past infancy. Phillis and John would eventually struggle with poverty for most of their lives, and John would then go to jail because of debt issues. Although Phillis continued to write, she could not support herself. She then worked as a maid in a boarding house, and in 1784, she died during childbirth, her infant dying the same day. Phillis wrote beautiful poetry, which showed all of her disdain for slavery, and she wrote with the intention to fight against the institution of slavery. Phillis Wheatley was a woman who showed the world that a black woman could be intellectual, creative, and competent as any human. Phillis helped the movement, no matter how big or small some may see her contributions. She showed those little black female writers who had nobody to embody themselves that they could do it, and that is thanks to her and her fight and her struggle against the life that she was put into. Phillis Wheatley was a black woman who had to fight battles and strive for her work to be seen and understood. She was a normal woman who wanted to live her life without the fight. She did it with grace anyway, and she fought so beautiful, and her amazing work and opinions to be shown to the many. And the poet June Jordan wrote the poetry, something like a sonnet for Phillis Miracle Wheatley. And she wrote about Phillis, and she states, "They taught you to read, but you learned how to write, begging the universe into your eyes. They dressed you in a light, but you dreamed with the night. From Africa singing of justice and grace, your early verse sweetens the fame of our race." Phillis Wheatley is a woman of inspiration for eternity.